Welcome to the board of NHS Direct NHS Trust. We've momentarily lost Keisha. Seeing as I think she was the first person here.
She was.
Hard to get the board going. I suggest we just wait a couple of minutes until she arrives.
Chat.
Here she comes.
Yes, actually quite nice to have. Well, there was a little bit of lunchtime, so.
I'll get to rush off to bed.
Fantastic.
Well,
Any excuse.
sorry, Joe.
No, I like the excuse, as Nick pointed out. First page to that. All right, so welcome again to the board. If I could ask anybody who's watching us online to fill in an evaluation form, feedback form, that would be very helpful. We have a couple of apologies and a couple of people running late. If I can start with the apologies. Alan Bentl's not available today. He's being supported by Adrian Price. Welcome, Adrian. Who's head of ICT and infrastructure. Ruth Rankin's not very well. Dave Hudson is here to support her, head of sales operations. We have Louisa Dillner, non-executive, who's detained at another board and will be with us shortly, and Steve Duncan, who's detained on the railway and will be with us in an hour, I believe. Okay, so I haven't had any declarations of interest about today's agenda. Anyone's welcome to declare interest now or later on. No? Let's then move straight to the minutes of our last meeting, which was quite a long time ago because we've had our summer break, 23rd of July. And that we have two sets of minutes there for the AGM and the board meeting. Can I please ask, first of all, if there are any matters of accuracy? Shall we take the AGM minutes first?
Chair, can I ask for the addition under page 3 of 7, paragraph 6.2, the fourth bullet point down, where we talk about recurrent savings of over £30 million. Could I ask for the addition of since 2009-10 to be added to that bullet point, please?
Thank you. I'm sure that can be done. Anything else? Yes?
On the same point, 6.2, the first bullet point, should that be 0.5 million?
Yeah.
Yes.
50p surplus. That was very sharp eyed of you. Okay, so I'm happy to confirm that we made £500,000.
Just 12.6. I'm sure that's probably exactly what I said, but it would be nice if I could rewrite the second part of that sentence.
You should have said.
Doesn't
sure
quite
you
read right.
I'm sure you can. So we'll have a slight
It won't change.
amendment to that, make it a more graceful comment. Fantastic. Okay, so that's all doable very easily, I think. Thank you for that. Let's then move on to the minutes of the board meeting, which followed the AGM. Are there any matters of accuracy? No, fine. Thank you very much. Let's move on to matters arising, which, as usual, we've encapsulated within the action log, which is 12B.083. Nick, do you want to just steer us through this?
Well, the first two items are on the agenda. The other three items there are closed, so it's really only the item that Trisha's reporting back on that on the last item.
The
so
Luton
pause
trial.
on. Yeah.
The report's complete. It's with Midlands and East.
Do we know what it says? Do we have an opportunity to comment on it?
We did have an opportunity to comment, and we have done. It advises that there is not a significant increase from 0845 calls to the urgent and emergency services. It has the trial indicated that it actually reduced the acuity of the mix of calls to the Luton service.
Fine. So that was presumably a bit of a surprise.
It was indeed.
Okay.
But we'll bring that paper.
It'll come back in substantively.
Yeah. And that's
Well,
it.
I guess it may or it may not actually, considering when we think about our governance changes.
We'll circulate it to the board
Yes.
anyway, as promised, and then we'll discuss the
how it gets handled.
how it gets handled. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm happy to answer any questions on my recent engagements.
Could I just pick one other thing up, which I think should have been a matter arising? We should have been receiving the serious incident report coming from the Clinical Governance Committee. If we look at the minute, it says that it will come back to the board in September. So if we just, probably the next meeting will be fine, but it's...
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll have that next time around.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay. Any questions on my engagements? I just have to say, actually, that the judging day for the eHealth Insider Awards was really stimulating, and there were a number of extremely interesting and valuable projects that had been shortlisted in the remote and virtual category. So that was a really encouraging exercise.
Chair, I understand that you attended one of our recognition and reward events, and managed to be useful to share your feedback on
I'd be happy to do that. What I suggest is that maybe I take that when we talk about our, all of us and our engagement with the staff, which we'll do later on the agenda. No, I'd be happy to talk about that. Okay, fine, thank you. Let's then move on into the performance section of our agenda today, and the first item, as usual, is Nick's Chief Executive's report.
I'll just go through very briefly a few of these items. The first is the service and staff transfers. What you actually have here are three examples. One where we've managed to transfer the calls but not the staff. The second where we've managed to transfer the staff but not the calls. And the third where we've achieved neither, but the transfer was due. So what I think it shows in summary is that there are continuing difficulties with the implementation of the department's agreement on Cabinet Office guidelines. That has been escalated through to John McIver and through him to Paul Watson as the sort of incoming performance management team for 111. And I also had the opportunity to escalate that and have a conversation with the NHS Commissioning Board's head of HR, Director of HR, Nick Greenfield, who's also taking the matter up. And I think it would be right to say that there is a determination to make sure that that the staff receive the level of support that is due, and that those transfers happen. So it is of concern, and I wouldn't hide that from the board, but we are, I feel that we are now getting significantly greater senior engagement with this problem, and I'm hoping that by the time I come to report on this again in a month's time perhaps, that we'll have seen significant improvement in the position.
And not before time.
And not before time.
Tim.
Thank you, Joanne. I know you've put a lot of effort into this, Nick, and well done for doing so. I just worry, having looked at a lot of the bids that went in, where there were some quite interesting or difficult potential liabilities from late startup. Where a third party is contracted to start up, are we sure that we're not going to get any liabilities from either late transfer of people or late transfer of the service, as you're suggesting?
No. Yes, I mean completely.
Do you see what I mean?
There's no liability on us from any impact that transfers might have.
They might try it on though.
Well, but there is no liability, it's quite clear.
Okay.
Roger.
I would like to convey to the board our utter exasperation of the processes so far. For us, as management teams trying to make these things happen, but actually more particularly for our staff, who in each of these cases have frankly been messed around with, and it appears like they've been messed around by us. And whilst that isn't the case, they would be forgiven for thinking that they have, and that's really not acceptable.
I think that's very unfortunate. Of course, we do need to recognise that the setting up of a 111 service is a complex and difficult thing to do. So I think we need to have a degree of empathy and understanding for the people who are trying to do that on the other side, whilst being absolutely indefatigable, which I know you are,
Indeed,
in protecting the interests of our staff and thereby protecting the public purse and the interests of the quality of the service. So it seems to me that what we need to do is to keep going on all of that, and I we sense your frustration, and particularly what feels like this very unfortunate dynamic that our staff entirely reasonably see it as us letting them down, at the same time maintaining as positive relationships as possible with the successful organisations, and I can see that's extremely difficult. If we're moving on from this, I'd like to ask a question about a related issue. Peter, do you want to come in first?
Well, it was a slightly different point. It was the bit about the terms and conditions of moving into a non-NHS organisation, because we've had that with our own as an organisational design in the past and looking at how that might be. And it's always been a slightly awkward area, and I know from my local government understanding of moving into social enterprises that preserving pension rights is one of the areas which is particularly testing. So I hope I was only going to say I hope they can find a solution to this. In local government, it's done by the organisation that is, as it were, sponsoring the social enterprise, underwriting pension situations, but I don't know how that works with.
I don't think that isn't a specific issue.
Okay.
Roger may be able to comment on the pension issue, but the specific issue that we've had has been the retention of employment protection. Specifically, and our legal advice is that this can be achieved through what's called a transfer order, and we're in discussion with the Department of Health about them using their power to make transfer orders to ensure that there's a kind of there's a belt and braces kind of guarantee.
Because there's an on-cost sometimes to TUPE transfers, which needs to be dealt with commercially, which will be a cost to the public sector.
Yes, and our issue is that this isn't even a TUPE transfer. That's the thing that is adding a layer of complication to our out of NHS potential transfers.
Thank you. All right, well, we'll tread into that one.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question about the slippage of the go live date in the North East. So they've slipped from the 4th of December till the 4th of September to the 11th of December. Despite the fact that that's an area in which there's a pilot already up and running.
Yes, so it's
debatable. What does that tell us?
Probably tells you they're being paid more for the pilot than the proper contract, but that's pure speculation on my part.
Is there anything that one can read into it about the likely slippage elsewhere? Because 3 months is a considerable gap.
To be honest, that was a slightly flippant comment. I should make that remark. But no, I don't have any specific information on their slippage. I can say that the Department of Health has also firmed up its determination to see national rollout, except for the 3 areas where there is an exemption, by 10 a.m. So we've firmed up on the time of day as well, on the 21st of March. And the fact that NHS Direct's costs have been underwritten for a further 3 months, which we will remember is because of the staff consultation time scale rather than any service requirement. They are determined to make sure that that people stick to that as a rollout date.
That's good, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely it is.
Good. Okay, so that's pleasing, because there was some ambiguity around the attitude they were taking.
Correct.
So that's very helpful.
But that ambiguity has been
resolved, I think.
Okay, so what else do you
So transition governance, I just wanted to follow up to say that Jackie Dunn and Keith and myself have been in discussion with NHS Midlands and East about the contractual implications of us taking a lot of staff offline to do pathways training and then the conversion of the service into the pathways mode of operation. And essentially, although more details will follow next month through the finance report, we have reached an agreement until Christmas and we just subdivided our discussions to reach agreement for until Christmas during the conversion period, and then our discussions I expect to be resolved fairly shortly about the period from Christmas beyond to the end of March. Essentially has now neutralised any negative financial impact that would have occurred as a result of us undertaking that training, because it's recognised we're doing that for the good of the system and the 111 rollout as a whole. So we've reached a very satisfactory conclusion from that point of view.
Excellent. Good. Any questions to Nick about anything in his report or anything else you might like him to explain to you? Okay, fine, thank you. Let's move on then, staying within the performance section of the agenda and looking at this substantial performance pack. So as usual, we've got that split between operational performance and finance, and I'm going to look to Trevor Smith to navigate us through it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Headlines from the performance report. First of all, overall patient user numbers remain below our planned and targeted levels, but what we've experienced is improvements into access of our services, in particular our clinical assessments and time to clinical assessment, which has been contributed to by the changes that we've made in the frontline application as referenced within the Chief Executive's report. So that has led to our best performance in terms of monthly performance this year and the lowest levels of performance penalties being incurred. Happy to take any questions on performance.
I think you simply recall what excellent performance it is, bearing in mind the huge uncertainty the organisation is facing. Tremendous.
Yes.
I was able to just about say that earlier to Keith. I do think it is remarkable. The one thing I was interested in was the use of the health advisors for more service providing, which seems to be a good idea, and the impact that has on our KPIs more generally seems to be good. And I was saying the second half of August it's even better.
And September has followed that trend, which we'll report on next month.
Very impressive.
Sue?
It is very impressive, and I'm delighted to hear it's continuing. I had two questions. One is around the urgent and emergency onward referrals.
Yeah.
Because is it fair to say that the improvement on the top half of the KPI table has partly been achieved at the expense of the urgent and emergency onward referrals? Yeah. Quite significantly, actually.
Shall I answer that one first? The answer is no. Essentially, what happens, and I'm happy for Nick or Trish to come in as well. Essentially, the urgent and emergency referrals really only get counted as that once they've come into the system and been prioritised, and with the health advisor they don't actually count, so we have a small numbers issue now, and it is something that we've been discussing with the Commissioner, as Nick alluded to, with our contract for the next 3-4 months. That is a KPI that's being adjusted, because the way that we measure that currently isn't relevant for the service that we're providing now.
But the overall volume or the proportion of our calls that now are referred into face-to-face care has increased. The proportion that's completed with NHS Direct has reduced. It's about 5%. Mm-hmm. We expect that to move further in that direction as we convert and implement pathways. So that's recognised by our Commissioner, that is a consequence of having rejigged the CSPT priorities. And I just wanted to highlight the role that Trisha's content team had taken in essentially minimising the impact that this is having on referrals into face-to-face by very carefully engineering it to be those calls where the additional assessment by a nurse adds least value in terms of diverting face-to-face referrals. But you're right, it has had an impact. The specific way that we measure the KPI, as Keith alluded to, is no longer, because it was linked to the number of P1s, and it was a dynamic target, and that's why it looked completely out of kilter. So
because we now no longer classify them as P1. They only get classified as P1s once they've been dealt with.
Okay.
So
It's
that once
like
they've been queued, so they're now no longer being queued.
like an equation that's only had one half of its
Yeah,
equation
changed. I understand.
shifted. I probably didn't explain that terribly well. So we've agreed with the Commissioner that actually we will not be measuring that specific KPI for that particular reason, and that we will continue to monitor against the completed within for NHS Direct, and they've agreed to reduce the target to 43%.
Excellent. And we were just below 15.
Yeah,
at this
so
point.
it's about it's come down by about 5% on where it actually was.
Okay. And a second question, if that's all right,
Yeah.
which is at the Clinical Governance Committee, when you explained to us how the new ways of working would happen, one of the questions we asked was, as a result of this, have we seen any increases in complaints or incidents? And I'd like to ask that question again.
To date, no. There has been no increase in complaints or serious untoward incidents.
Right.
And I'd just like to add for the board's information, the clinical content team and the senior clinical team are continuing to review the clinical sorting in a view of how we can add value in the future for the use of pathways. So from the next couple of months, we're taking the learning from the changes we've made to our CSPT and seeing whether we can take that learning across into pathways.
Yeah. Keith.
I just wanted to add to that. So, as we've spoken about these, the algorithm changes that we made have contributed greatly to performance. In addition, our recruitment effort. So we've brought in now 160 more nurses to date, with a target of another 80, and most of those are either on stream or in training, those 160, and a further 80 to come in. So that recruitment effort that the board will be well aware has been an intensive effort within operations for 6 months now is beginning to bear fruit. So those two issues combined are giving us some headroom.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question. I mean, what we know, and we've been saying for a long time, is that the 111 system in pathways, as it's currently configured, increases onward referrals. And we're seeing that through the changes we're having to make to our own service as everything converges on a 100% pathway solution by the middle of next year. We're seeing that in our own 0845 service as well. Is there yet a debate going on amongst the people commissioning 111, people running urgent care, the people who are dealing with the additional demand that is likely to come to them about how they're going to manage that?
No.
At some of the 111 implementation meetings I've attended recently, there are some commissioners who are entering conversations with us with regards to the added value of clinical advice. So they are recognising the potential of increasing their urgent and emergency referrals and the access to those areas, and are keen to engage with us in piloting the additional clinical advice to
And I think
reduce that.
that's true of the areas where we've been successful, where we were successful, because frankly that was the pitch that we made, which is we can provide the 111 service for you, but if it's implemented as you specified, it will put up your demand. If you come to us, we can help you to resolve that by developing the way that the service works.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
But as a
Thank you.
general national debate, I don't think it's hit the radar.
Okay.
I mean, all I can say is certainly as one example in West Sussex, there's a horrendous uplift in demand for urgent care.
Yeah.
And the issue that's being debated isn't around 111 or anything else, it's about the social care health interface and older people accessing urgent care networks where they might not be doing that. So it's certainly not the broader based debate that you're talking about, but it is being discussed, but along those lines. And the reaction is to put into place a thing called, I mentioned it before, proactive care, which is the sort of front door of admissions or service for people, which combines health and social care on the ground. So.
Okay, and what we're talking about would be another part of that jigsaw. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Shall we then move on, if there aren't any more comments or questions about operational performance, to move on to financial performance? John?
Our financial position remains ahead of plan. We have a surplus for the year to date of £300,000. We are working closely at the moment with our budget holders and managers to establish out-term forecasts for year end and any restatement of their financial plans in year. This should be completed during October. We continue to track and monitor the position very carefully, but it's a strong position to be in at this point in the year.
Thank you, Trevor. I think we'd all agree with that. Any questions? Right, Trevor.
It's a point of detail, I think. First of all, I should say I'm very, very satisfied with financial performance. But in paragraph 2.1, we have a table. And it's okay for us because we understand the business. We should understand the business sitting around this table. But the actual and variance column has two switches of unit within it. It starts with pound millions, it becomes whole-time equivalent, it becomes pound millions again. I think as this is a document in the public domain, we actually should highlight very clearly what the unit is as you work down that column. It could get very confusing when you get to a figure of 1666 pounds million.
We will revisit
So I think we just need the headings in.
There you are. See?
Very good. Tim.
On the risks, risk 4, which is higher than expected frontline attrition backfill with more expensive agency staff, and our mitigation is cost to be absorbed by savings elsewhere in the frontline staffing budget. How that sounds a difficult balance.
Yeah.
And it could get worse as we approach the end of 0845. Do we think that that's always going to be the case, or will we have to have a discussion with our commissioners about those costs?
Shall I kick off and Keith might want to follow? What we're doing at the moment, Tim, is very closely tracking and monitoring our operations budgets and forecasts, making sure that wherever possible we can manage within our internal resources. Where there are requirements that it falls outside of our control, we would clearly be having further discussions with East of England. But beyond the discussions that have been had around performance metrics, around winter pressure funding, we feel that we're in a position to actually manage within our existing resources.
And to take that to a level further down, where we have attrition on frontline staff, and that is replaced with our in-source provision, whilst on a unit hourly rate the in-source provision is more expensive per hour than the frontline member of staff, we get a fully inclusive rate for those, so we don't have to backfill team managers, performance managers, so we lose those costs accordingly, and that's where we need to catch up and do further adjustment.
I know you keep a close eye on it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions on the financial performance tonight? Okay. Thank you for that. We can then move on to the strategy section of the agenda, where we have one paper on, which is a look back at the Future Workforce project. A hugely significant project that was had an enormous impact on our staff. I think it's important and helpful to do a look back exercise. And Roger, are you the person who's going to introduce it?
Yes. So this is, as the Chair says, this is the final review of our Future Workforce project, which I have to say the board has accompanied the organisation through very closely over the last, it's 14 or 15 months in fact. We launched the consultation to put these measures into place back in July 2011. We had a board seminar following the consultation and decided to go ahead at the board meeting in November 2011. We effected the changes, and the first rosters were worked on the 26th of March this year. From an operational point of view, we have achieved the objectives we set out to achieve, which is really about producing a rostering system that was a lot simpler, a lot more straightforward, less contractual, and gave us the opportunity to increase and decrease staffing much more easily than any of the previous rostering systems we've had. And the improvements in rostering efficiency and schedule adherence since March bear witness to that. So from an operational point of view, it's been a success. It has had an effect on the workforce, as you quite rightly said, Chair, and I think there are two indications of that. One was a dramatic but short-lived increase in attrition in March when we implemented the programme. And the second has been a number of challenges. The board was involved, of course, in the RCN challenge earlier this year and helped us reach a resolution on that. And there are still a number of challenges either internally or through employment tribunals that we're working through, and I'll report back to the board at a later date what the final outcome of those are. So I'll take any questions, Chair.
I'm sure there will be questions. I think the lessons learned section particularly is very instructive. So I think I saw Trevor Jones first, and then I saw Keith Catchwell.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very helpful update. I wonder whether, Roger, you could tell us what the position of the Royal College of Nursing is now. Not on individual cases, because they should be supporting individual members of staff, but in terms of how overall we've reacted to their initial challenges.
Yeah, well, we paused our flexible working exercise, if you recall at the time, and we worked with two members of the board to re-establish our position in relation to our public duty under the Equality Act 2010. We made some decisions at the April board on how we would take that forward, and we informed the RCN of what we were doing. We haven't heard back specifically from the RCN on that matter since then.
Do you feel they are relatively content with the process we followed?
In the absence of anything to the contrary, absolutely, yes.
Good.
I think it's perhaps not surprising that we haven't had a collective response from the RCN in view of the fact that there are a number of individual cases going forward. So I take silence as that we have responded appropriately to their concerns, and silence means is a positive feature.
And it is regrettable, of course, that we still have some individual challenges, but I think in the circumstances of this sort of change, that is not that surprising.
Yeah, I just want to reflect on just a comment, really. Obviously, these changes had a big impact on a large number of people and their lifestyles, and it was quite a jolt, I think, for everyone to come to terms with the fact that as an organisation there needed to be an adjustment to ensure a future for a service going forward, but at the same time to reflect the balance of trying to support people whose individual needs were significant. And the one thing that struck me is that, difficult as that was, I think it's been done in a sensitive but clear way, because the worst of all worlds is not to be clear about where you stand. And I think that being clear has helped people, difficult as it is, to be certain about what they want to do with their own lives. And we have also, which is I think a point I would value a comment on, been as a board very close to the policy. And it's not in the lessons learned bit here, but my view is that its success, well, we had a bit of a stutter around this to start with, and you've made comments about that, but I think a solid piece of work was done through the building in the board processes, so that we were engaged fully in it. And at that particular stage, I know there was an issue with the RCN, but for me, and I'd be grateful for your comments on that, I felt that that was the right point of intervention, that we did it as a board and took it forward as a board and decided how this test of applying compliance with the Equalities Act would be taken through. And that to me felt a good process. Before we hadn't done that, and I just, it's not in the lessons learned. That's all. So,
I mean, I think it is
something you.
Yeah, I think it is worth pointing out that there was a board seminar before the November decision.
I agree with that.
And so there has been close involvement from the board throughout this. But I'd also I appreciate very much that non-executives responded extremely quickly to an issue we had from the challenge under the Public Duty Equality Act, and we were able to move it on within 3 or 4 weeks, and that was because non-executive colleagues were able to respond very quickly and help us through that problem. So.
And having a clear definition and also a process and the support of the occupational health
Yes, has
been vital, I think,
absolutely,
to succeeding and being objective about it all as well.
Thanks, Peter. I'm going to take Nick and then Keith.
I just found the graph very helpful in 5.1, showing the attrition that we have had. I just thought it was really interesting. It shows the spike that we had in the period. I'm just wondering what happened in June, July 2008, where clearly there was a similar, slightly higher spike of attrition. Just wondered what it was.
I don't know. I personally can't remember that, but I'm sure your colleagues will research it for you.
Okay, it's fine. Sorry. Yes.
But I think, your point is that
Notice of that question.
that if you look at more recent years, what happened during the period of our future workforce was basically within the range
Absolutely.
that we normally see
very much so. That's
with
right.
the one spike. And I think that is a reassuring picture. Thank you. Keith.
Could I just inform the board that our Future Workforce project has been shortlisted for a CCA Innovation Excellence Awards, has been through 2 rounds of judging, and we've made the finals.
And that's the Contact Centre
Contact
Association.
Centre Association, it's their annual Innovation Excellence Awards.
My goodness, I think that's interesting. So well done, yeah. Okay, good. Thank you very much, Roger. If there aren't any more questions, then I think we can move on into the governance and compliance section of the agenda, which is, as always, interesting and important, but perhaps a sort of more significant, particularly this time around. Nick, would you like to introduce?
Very briefly, I won't go through the detail of the proposals, as I'm sure people will either ask questions or make comments. But we are facing, in the next 6 months or so, 3 really very significant challenges, and any one of them would be significant. But to have all 3 is really quite a challenge. Managing the existing service in the complex and changing environment, transitioning and decommissioning the service and all of the staff and assets associated with it, and creating the future NHS Direct. So in response to that, what we've come forward with, as board members will be well aware, is to streamline our governance structure and enable greater focus to be brought about on each of those 3 through the creation of 2 new subcommittees. And I apologise in advance if what this does is it creates additional requirements for non-executive time during this period, but I think that the proposals we've got in front of us are necessary in view of the challenges that we've got. So that's my brief introduction, and I'm hoping that the board will be happy to approve it.
Okay, I'd like to just say something before we have a conversation about it. So this is the final outcome of a conversation that's been going on around the board for quite a few weeks now, and there was a seminar in which we looked at an earlier version, and we've made a significant change since that seminar, listening to people's views, which was to create a kind of symmetrical structure within the governance framework, with one subcommittee taking on responsibility for overseeing the 0845 service until its decommissioning and managing the transition process, and one looking towards establishing the future NHS Direct. The points I'd like to make are, most of you I think will have heard me make these points already. One, that this is an interim arrangement, which is the way that we feel we can best and most safely govern this very turbulent transition period and stretch our resources across this huge agenda. It's not a final allocation of people for forever. It's a case of using our resources in the most effective way over the next few months. We've just finished the process of allocating non-executives to those roles aligned with executives, and that wasn't an easy process. we basically wanted everybody's skills applied to both of those two challenges. That's not possible, and the solution that we've come up with, I think, is the best that we could do given the circumstances, and will enable us to safely and effectively transition the organisation into the future. So Trevor Jones is going to chair the current NHS Direct subcommittee, which will oversee the management of 0845 and the transition, and I'm going to chair the subcommittee on the future of the organisation, and the non-executives who are going to support Trevor are Tim Hayman, Sue, Tim Walton, and the non-executives who are going to support me are Peter Catchpole, Louisa and Steve Duncan, who aren't here at the moment. And the board itself will continue to perform a vital function in an integrated fashion, overseeing the entire operation and finances of the organisation. But a lot of our business now will be done in those two subcommittees. So that feels like a helpful step to address these huge demands that are going to be on the organisation. Happy to take comments and questions either to me or to Nick or to Trevor, indeed. And Trevor, if you want to say anything about the way that you see your work and your subcommittee going forward.
First of all, I think I'd make two comments on the paper. In paragraph 5, we're arguing quite rightly that the new structure will allow us to give the right degree of freedom to creating the new organisation. I think it also does something very important. It allows us to have a very proper focus on managing the current business and also working with all 111 providers, supporting them to have a good take-off. Because I think the 0845 part of the business has to really get a relationship which is about supporting the creation of 111 across the whole country. So I would just stress that there's two very positive reasons: creating the new NHS Direct 111, but also helping others to create that. So I think that's very positive. My other point on the paper, which I think is very, very important for us to pick up fairly quickly, is being very clear how we devolve very significant power to the committee managing the new business. I think we need to establish a very, very clear budget and allow that committee then to manage itself within a very clear devolved framework. But I think that needs to be quite explicit so that we never, at the board, start rethinking what the committee can and can't do, because that committee needs the time to get on and do it without any hindrance from the rest of the organisation, if you like.
We'd certainly want to take a significant step forward in October in terms of a budget reset for the organisation, taking into account a number of different features, but certainly that would be one of them.
Okay, fine. Well, as a board, we've had the chance in seminar mode to discuss this quite extensively. So I think that probably is the reason underlying the fact that we can accept this, to approve it and take it forward now. Shall we do that? Fine, approved then, thank you. Sarah, the board assurance framework is with you.
Thank you. The board assurance framework has been reviewed by the executive team, and it's also been updated in line with phase 4 of the Our Future programme. We are removing 2 objectives from the scorecard this month, and these are 2 of Tricia's objectives, B22 and B23, and this is due to there being no national KPIs set for those objectives.
So they've gone. Okay. Right. Any questions on the board assurance framework for Sarah or for anyone behind it? Okay, thank you very much indeed. The public, then moving swiftly on to the public element of the corporate risk register, also yours, Sarah.
Yes, corporate risk register has also been reviewed and updated, and we've remapped the key risks from the register to the board assurance framework, and I'm pleased to report that we currently have no red risks on our corporate risk register.
Significant movement there being the CSPT changes.
Ah, okay, which has helped us manage our operational risks.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. All right, thank you.
Can
Roger?
Chair, can I just point out that we do have two new risks, however, on the second page, so that people haven't noticed
so
the two new risks. They're risks we've
phrase
talked
those.
about already today. You know what they are. It's not surprising they're there. They are amber at the moment.
And those are Cabinet Office guidelines.
Guidelines and the enforcement of Cabinet Office guidelines.
Further point.
Yes, yes, please.
The board will be aware that we had some issues over the last 3 or 4 months with our in-sourced provider of health advisors. I'm pleased to report that we have instigated a contract change with those. They're now accountable on an hourly basis, and we have passed through financial penalties to them, and their performance has significantly improved in recent weeks.
Yes, that's good. Thank you very much. Good, that's great. Okay, so we now have some minutes and terms of reference from our subcommittees. Feedback minutes and annual report in terms of reference. So Sue, you've got quite a package there from the Clinical Governance Committee. You've actually been working very hard.
I'll try and do it fairly quickly. Feedback from the last committee meeting, which was on the 7th of September, not the 9th as it says on the agenda. We received a clinical governance report, quarterly clinical governance report, where we considered the clinical performance and KPIs in a lot of detail. We considered complaints and incidents and lessons learned therefrom. And we had a fairly vigorous debate around the new ways of working that we've already touched on here, around making the CSPQ changes to place greater reliance on health advisors to close P2 calls without transferring to nurses, and the implications of that on the number of nurses we may need in the future. And again, confirmation that there'd been no increase in complaints or incidents as a result of those changes. The committee will continue to review that to make sure that stays the same. We then had an update from the research and clinical audit, specifically around urgent and emergency care clinical audit report, which was interesting reading, and we had quite a lengthy discussion around the PROMs and PREMs for the 111 service.
Could you?
Sorry.
PROMs I'm familiar
Patient
with.
outcomes, patient experience measures, in effect, around the Northwest NHS 111 service and the Lincolnshire NHS 111 service. And the committee was sort of getting to grips with what information is now going to be collected on a national basis to allow comparative data. And the types of questions that were used, comparing that to the patient satisfaction report that we use within the 0845 service. We also touched on the clinical governance terms of reference. At the last meeting, we had an effectiveness review for the committee, and a couple of issues were raised around access of the clinical audit lead, Shirley Large, to the committee. And we have now changed the terms of reference to allow to make it explicit that there is a direct link and that she can contact me directly at any point in time if she needs to, if there's any issues raised through the clinical audit process. Okay. Following that meeting, I then actually met Shirley for 40 minutes to go through in a bit more detail the research programme that we're doing, and that was all very interesting, and the clinical audit process as well. Okay, so that was the 7th of September. You have the minutes for the meeting before that, which was held on the 29th of June, and I think Trevor gave a verbal update at the last board meeting in my absence, so unless anybody's got any specific questions on that. No? Okay. The annual report from the committee is here, just setting out the work plan that we had and what we've achieved during the year. And I can confirm that we have actually covered everything and more of the plan that we had originally set out, although sometimes to slightly different timings. And we have taken on board the issues coming out of the self-assessment review and put the necessary changes through, including through to the terms of reference, which I've already mentioned. So if there's anything anybody wants specifically to ask, then I'm happy to answer.
I think what you reminded us of is the enormous importance of the Clinical Governance Committee and the work that it does in underpinning what the board's able to do in the safety and quality of the services we offer. So that's been a kind of helpful reminder. And it's worth me saying that this is the kind of factor that we took into account when we were working out how to deploy non-executives on the two subcommittees, because it's very clear that until formal handover into the new NHS Direct, Clinical Governance Committee will be overseeing the quality and safety of the services to all of our patients. And at this time of transition and turbulence and attrition and movement of staff into new providers, that's exactly the time when we know from a whole range of examples, we know that it's a time when we have to be continuing to be absolutely focused on the quality of the frontline service. And we're very confident that will happen with the Clinical Governance Committee as it's currently constituted and feeding into the current services subcommittee. So that's very good and very reassuring. And I think it also applies to the Finance Committee, which Tim is going to give us his annual report.
Yes, thank you, Joanne. I think we can take the report as read. It's been a really busy year.
Yes.
We've looked at every single bid that's gone out in quite a lot of detail, and I think rather than that, all I want to add to this is my thanks to my non-exec colleagues. We were always quarried.
Yeah,
it's quite close occasionally, but we looked at every single bid, and we got better at it as time went on, I think, and we learnt with the executives, and I think it was a very worthwhile thing. With looking at the future of the Finance Committee, I think the statement that we've just seen in the previous paper was spot on, because there are still one or two issues, and one's coming up, a commercial issue is coming up in the private section of the meeting today. We need to be very careful that we don't duplicate anything in the time period that we've got left, but I think we need to have a sort of careful down management of the Finance Committee and passing those accountabilities smoothly through to the new bit of the organisation. So I'm very confident in that. I'll take any questions.
Another question. I'd just like to echo Tim's thoughts and to say that the testing, the assessment, the reviews of those bids and the recommendations made by the Finance Committee, I think helped to improve the quality of the bids that we submitted, as well as the tactics that were deployed through that time. So I'd like to pass on my thanks to members.
It was a very interesting example, I thought, of non-executives without crossing the boundary to take on executive responsibilities, but nevertheless being deployed sort of flexibly and intelligently on this new task that we really never had we've never had anything of that scale in terms of bidding before. So it's a really quite an interesting case study there, I think. And Tim, thank you for steering that through. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions for Tim, we can then move on to the next section of our agenda. Is everybody happy to continue, or do we want to break now? No? Happy to go on? Okay, so we're now talking about our stakeholders, and we have two sort of related items, which are the call recordings, which we've all hopefully been able to listen to, which were related to dental calls, or calls from people with dental problems, let's say, and also a related review of the quality of the dental service. So, Tricia, would you like to introduce?
You've jumped over item 14. There's no reason why we can't jump back to it.
No, I think I'm on a roll. I'd rather carry on and talk about the...
Just wanted to make sure it was conscious, that was it.
It wasn't at all. It's possible, I think, that we may get Louisa or Stephen before, so unconsciously it may well have been the right decision. And so, if you'll bear with me, we will stick with patient call recordings and the dental service quality review. So, Tricia.
Thank you, Chair. The calls that were provided for board members for this month were to help inform and raise questions in relation to the dental service quality review as well. So I'll cover both items, Chair, if that's okay. The patient experience call recordings are an example of patients calling both our commissioned services and our core 0845 service. and I think are a very good reflection of what we provide to patients who on these call recordings actually rang in with specific dental problems. I think it's important for the board to note that we have significantly more calls to the service as a consequence of potential overdose of medications which relate to patients with dental pain than that are not recorded as necessarily having dental symptoms when they ring into the service. So the call volumes are significantly increased to do with the medications requirement. And I'll take questions with regards to the call recordings. I think it's important to note that the call recordings do actually inform the service quality review paper and adds some detail that we identified within the quality review, which was, is this a service that we could add value to in a 111 future service? Because what we do know is in our future 111 service, these patients would be advised to attend their dentist. Yet in the service quality review, we actually identified that the patients got significant value from speaking to a dental nurse and being advised on how to manage their dental pain and to manage their dental symptoms to a point where they then could seek further treatment and ongoing care for their problem.
Yeah, I thought that came through very clearly, the added value there. Okay. Are there any comments or questions or observations about, first of all, the call recordings? First, did everybody get a chance to hear them? Yes.
Yeah, except for number 4.
Except for
Didn't quite get there.
Okay. Any thoughts about those? Tim?
I thought they were excellent, actually. I thought of all the call recordings we've had the pleasure of listening to, this was the most comprehensively good set. But it did occur to me as I was listening to them that there was nothing we were doing by voice which wouldn't have been extremely well done online.
I agree.
Okay, that's interesting.
And it is something we've considered for the health and symptom checkers online, but it would be the connection. We would have to have the engagement of commissioners for us to be able to then have a booking appointment online. Should be available. It's the obvious next step, but isn't currently.
Okay, so that's very interesting. So we've got a clear idea of what would really add value.
Yeah.
Symptom assessment, linked to ability to speak to somebody if you need to, linked to an online booking service, and that is a really could be very powerful for patients and for commissioners as well. Nick?
5 quick points. Demographics again. All those minutes of which block of flats do you live in, and hopefully we will see with the PDS integration that will diminish. Let's hope. Secondly, I've just written down you can hear the pain.
Yeah.
Actually hear the pain in people's voices as they're coming through on the phone. It's extraordinary. Clear adding value. I haven't really focused on the avoiding overdoses painkillers aspect, but I guess you'll do anything for the toothache. So I thought that was important, something I hadn't thought about. Fourthly, just shows how stretched our out-of-as face-to-face dental services are. They are not there to be referred into in any great volume. And fifth point was that it's interesting that we had calls from both commissioned and 0845. They're pretty much interchangeable, which I'm sure we'll come on to when we talk about the service review.
Sue?
Yes, clear added value. It did strike me that they're quite long.
Yeah, they are long. So too.
You know, the first nurse one was 9 minutes.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I think the patient satisfaction is so high is that there's a real sense of trying to help and reassure and in a situation where you can't suddenly get sent to a face-to-face appointment, that's important. But there must be a way, I think, of perhaps shortening these
Streamlining. Well, I think that's very interesting because we've observed before that doctors in the West Yorkshire Urgent Care Service seem to have a particular ability to have calls which are very concise and focused and also empathetic. And that's something which, it doesn't, I think the learning from that, listening to those, was it doesn't need to be long to be empathetic and supportive.
Yeah, exactly.
And I could certainly felt I heard in some of the calls, the caller actually being quite keen to get off the line.
I did too. Yeah.
Which is obviously, I mean, that's a lose-lose, isn't it?
Yeah.
If we're keeping the callers on the line longer than they want to be on the line, that's not good for anyone. Another observation I have, which I don't quite know what to make of, is the variety of tone of voice of NHS Direct. When you ring NHS Direct, there isn't an NHS Direct style. There is a whole range, and maybe that's good, because it's about the individuals. Or maybe there is a thought for the future that might be about more of a house style that you get when you call NHS Direct and it's NHS Direct. Because we had everything from was you punched to whole sort of other very very different styles, and I'm just processing that really. I saw some other hands up, I think.
I just had one. I thought they were long calls. I agree. And the thing that struck me was the call number 2. Is it the one where the health advisor did most of the work, all the work, and the fact that they actually went through as well. I think did quite well as the dental nurses. Which so I was impressed with that call, and also the empathetic point you made was clearly there, but it went on for, I think that was 9 minutes nearly. But it needed to partly go on. I mean, I don't think it cut it too much, but that was one call, and then got a phone call back afterwards saying you've got an appointment, which gave the person the reassurance they needed. I think he was the professional client though, because he knew all about his teeth. I think he was the one who said I've been around a bit and I've struggled with my teeth for a long time, and so he wanted to get off the line, I think, quite quickly. But it was that was very good, I thought.
Thank you. Trish, is there anything additionally you'd like to say about the dental service quality review?
Sorry, Chair.
Could you just tell us a bit about how many calls we take?
Yes, okay. So the service quality review was the final report of our 25, which we've undertaken over the last 18 months. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the multidisciplinary teams who have contributed to the service quality reviews. For information, we receive currently 9,000 calls to our commissioned services. In the past, that used to be 115,000 calls, so a significant reduction. And we believe that's a consequence of commissioners having identified now what their commissioning needs are for their communities, setting up new services within their area. But we have still been able to maintain and provide some of our most larger contracts, predominantly in the northwest. We also did have 26 individual commissioned services, which over the last 12 months have now reduced and will be at the end of this year 10. So we have seen some progression of commissioners identifying what their needs are and commissioning alternative services. And that's really my conclusion, Chair.
Nick,
I wanted just to jump in on the. So during the course of 10-11, we significantly changed the pricing structure of our dental services contracts. And the reason for that was that when those dental services contracts were originally introduced many moons ago, in conjunction with the Department of Health, they were costed on a marginal cost basis. In other words, it was assumed that all the full costs of running NHS Direct were absorbed by the 0845 service, and then if commissioners wanted an additional commissioned dental service, they just paid a marginal addition. Midlands and East, or East of England as it was then, came along and said, that is cross-subsidy, and we require you to reallocate the overheads. And what that did to our dental services is it almost doubled the prices. And at the same time as introducing that, many commissioners realised, as I think is clear from the call recordings, what you get from the 0845 service, which to a local commissioner is completely free, is very similar to what you get if you commission the service and pay for it. And whilst it was at £7 or £8 a call, you're prepared to put up with it, but when someone comes along and says, actually we're doubling it and it's now going to be 16, you then start, many of the commissioners looked at, well, what are the, why has it gone up so much? Well, it's being cross-subsidised, and what are our alternatives? And that's why we've lost all those contracts. It's nothing to do with the efficiency or the efficacy of the service, I should say.
But what that suggests is that in a 111 environment, where the 111 service will not be like this, there may well be a return on investment argument for putting in additional dental services. And that's something that the new organisation will want to look at.
And we're still waiting for the Department of Health to conclude whether they recognise that essentially, and whether they want to continue to commission a national dental service, even just for a period of time, while that transition happens.
Yeah. Tim?
There's no national dental service at the moment.
Well, only the
apart from us.
Yeah.
The general service. And the general service will remain as a 111, which won't provide any avoidance of seeing a dentist by definition.
That's right.
And so there's a very powerful argument.
There is.
To put some small investment even into providing an alternative.
Trevor?
Concern I would have, Chair, is that beyond commissioners just using 0845 as a default service substitute, which will no longer be available, that they haven't actually seen the value of the service going forwards. They see the visibility of cost, not the value.
And that's going to be a problem. And whether in fact the dental service stops people going to a dentist or makes them more comfortable and safe in the period before they see a dentist, I don't know how you cost that. It's something we're going to have to think about. Tricia?
Yeah, 87,000 calls come into our call service, which are primarily dental related, where a dental algorithm's been used. Now, I did make reference to the additional calls where there is the overdose of medications. And just taking us back to the call reviews, what I took away from the calls when I listened to them is how skilled the dental nurses are at managing patients in dental pain. Some of the registered nurses have struggle with a patient in pain and advising on medications and advising you may wait 24 to 48 hours to receive treatment, where the dental nurses are really skilled at this is the situation, this is the measures you can take, the self-care you can take until you can get to a dental appointment, which is either your own dentist or an out-of-hours provider. And the subtlety of that is really significant when you consider the impact on services that are available. So my view is in a 111 service, the demand for the out-of-hours and urgent access centres will significantly increase because the health advisors will signpost. Anything that is referred to a nurse will be referred on, while the dental nurses are experts at being able to conclude over the phone in order to then receive routine dental care.
Okay, that's very interesting. Roger?
Yes, and to add to that, although we are looking at the possibility of dental nurse advisors becoming health advisors to fill vacancies and therefore find ways of preserving their employment, if they choose not to do that, then we face the prospect of all our dental nurse advisors becoming redundant at some point in the next 9 months.
That was my point, actually. If we are to retain the capability of delivering this, then quite urgent action is needed.
Yeah.
We have been pressing the case very clearly with the Department of Health. I've pointed out those stark facts that have just been rehearsed again, and are they have given us a commitment to give us an answer to these questions, whether they will continue to commission services, etc. Dental is not the only one, during October. So, urgent action has been taken for some while now.
Well done. Yes, I know, Nick, actually.
Okay.
Keep going.
Good. Do we have any questions or comments further on the dental paper? No. Well, welcome to Steve. We're
Apologies.
just about to go into the Trust Board engagement visits, which is the time that we have to talk about events and interaction with NHS Direct staff, where non-executives have been involved. And we've got quite a list because there has been a programme of long service and values awards, and a number of us have been involved in that, including me. I don't know quite where to start, whether just to invite anyone who's been at one of those events to talk about what they were like, and feedback, whether executive or non-executive. We've had some very interesting feedback on email already, actually, about the events. But would anyone like to kick off?
I'll start. I went to the Manchester one, being in the northwest, but there were people from quite a number of people from Newcastle, people from Stafford there. I was really impressed by their positivity. I hate that word. Do you know who says that? People were incredibly positive, despite the very uncertain situation that they find themselves in. And I've got to say that our communication strategy must be at least part of that. So I was really pleased that our staff are still dedicated to giving a good service, despite the uncertainties that they have around them. I was most impressed by that.
Nick, were you going to?
Yeah, it's great. I really enjoyed them. I've learned some new funny stories from people about funny things that have happened, which of course I won't repeat. It's a pleasure, really. I think particularly the awards side, the sheer recognition and on people's faces, the fact that they have been recognised by their peers for doing outstanding things just shines out. I think it's a real credit to some of Roger's original team in the internal comms department and our own and others who helped get that award scheme going. And I think it's grown and it's really valuable. People really enjoy it.
Trevor.
I was at the Birmingham event. I was at the Birmingham event last year and had this exactly the same occurred in both years, and that is most of the awards tended to go to the same call centre. And when I asked in advance why that was the case, it was because a number of call centres don't nominate. Now, whilst people at the event thoroughly enjoy it, great event, it just feels as though we're dealing with a relatively small part of the organisation in that part of the world.
That's very interesting. Have we ever tracked that?
I wasn't aware of that. So that's interesting.
It's 2 years running it's happened in the West Midlands.
We should look into that.
I mean, that may not be a problem. If people choose not to nominate, that's fine. But it just feels odd that, it's the same call, every award's almost the same call centre.
Yeah. I think the concern would be if there are people working in contact centres who don't have the same opportunity to get awards, if that's the case. Yeah. That's very interesting. I went to Manchester with Tim, Nick, Tricia. I also thought it was very interesting. And so I wanted to say two things. One, I thought the comms team have done a brilliant job in setting those meetings up and in creating an atmosphere which is sort of warm, welcoming, informal, but has the right degree of importance attached to it. So I thought they did very well indeed. And the other thing which always strikes me is how dramatically the service has changed over the period, the last 10 years. Yeah. And the stuff we take for granted now about consistency, rigour, the degree of management, how different that is. And so a number of things follow from that. One is respect for the staff who've managed to come through that enormous change, who started doing something which is very, very different from what we're asking of them today. And the second thing is to recognise how instrumental this organisation has been in creating a sort of discipline of rigorous, empirically evidence-based, consistent remote health assessment, advice and information, and it's an extraordinary achievement, really. It's always very interesting to spend time with staff, of course, and hearing what they have to say. Okay, so I think we are probably through the formal items in our public board agenda, unless anyone has any other business.
Just on
Tim.
engagement visits, I went
Yes.
separately to Milton Keynes
Okay.
with Keith, and separately for the awards rather
Yep.
than that. And impressed, but the one concern I had, which I discussed with Keith, was that some members of staff, of our own staff, felt somehow to a sort of separate tribe from the conduit agency staff in what they were being asked to do, how they were being asked to do it, and what support was being offered, which worries me a little bit going forward into these next few months, but I know is something which can relatively easily be dealt with. So just thinking about the comms again, and actually the order of training on pathways, for instance. We could perhaps look at that and discuss it with Keith.
And part of that's already been covered,
Yes.
and particularly last week's new shot, and we continue to focus
the
on
new shop's good.
Okay, good. Interesting to recognise that, and good that it's being addressed.
Yes.
Thank you. Tricia, then Trevor.
The senior clinical team also identified an opportunity where we felt we could integrate further with the conduit staff, and we have, with Keith's support, offered additional clinical support within the conduit call centre through core review and the relationships within the Milton Keynes site. It was identified that one of our middle managers, who is a clinician working across both services, would also help with relationships as well as the quality and core review and support within conduit and the Milton Keynes core service.
Good. Trevor?
It's a fairly old visit, but it hasn't been reported to the board. Keith and I went to Bristol, and we simply to look at the 111 service, not the 0845 part of the business. And I think I was left with two impressions. First of all, how well managed the training and the organisation of 111 has been. I was hearing that from the managers and also the staff who've been through the training. But most importantly, how enthusiastic and committed people who are working on the 111 service are. They've gone through the transition from 0845 was wonderful and what's this awful thing happening to us, to we have a new service that is a better service, and hugely enthusiastic in terms of how they manage it, which is real success, I think.
Great, thank you. Okay, so then we'll have another go for any other business. Any other business?
No, thank you.
I think then we can close the public meeting. The next one will be on the 29th of October here at 10:30. I suggest we take a break and commence in the private session at midday.
Thank you, Chair.